Marcos, we're going to get started out. We're so excited to have you here today. Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining today. Start Strong LLCs, Contracts and Business Basics. My name is Vanessa Castillo Bell. I'm the Senior Business Development Manager here at Local First Arizona, and I'm excited to kick off today's session. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping notes. Zoom offers captions and translations options, which you can find in the Zoom controls at the very bottom. We're also recording today's session, and once it's posted on our local learning lab, we'll share the link with all RSVP so you can revisit the material anytime. For those who may be new to Local First Arizona, we're a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting locally owned businesses and building a stronger and more resilient Arizona economy. So through business resources, workshops similar to this, and community programs, we help entrepreneurs like you thrive and grow sustainably. Now, I'm excited to introduce today's speaker, Marcos Garia Acosta, a business and trademark attorney with a background in engineering and international business. Marcos specializes in helping startups, small businesses, and corporations navigate contracts, trademarks, and intellectual property. Whether you're just launching your business or looking to strengthen your legal foundation, this session will provide you with practical steps to protect yourself and your business from day one. Throughout Marco's presentation, you're welcome to ask questions in the chat feature at any time. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation where you can continue using the chat or come off mute to ask questions directly. With that, Marcos, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna be doing some foils presentation. So let me jump on that. And I think everybody should be able to see this. And that's my introductory page. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So as you mentioned, my name is Marcos, and I'm an attorney here in Arizona. I have a background in engineering, electrical engineering, and I work in the high-tech industry for almost 30 years, specifically 20 in semiconductors. And I have a broad experience working in multicultural and international environments, mainly Latin America, but also Asia, Taiwan, and Chinese-speaking countries. Okay. Our focus, we specialize on helping small, medium-sized entrepreneurs and also entrepreneurs that want to expand their business in the United States, people that have businesses somewhere else and that they want to take the leap and grow internationally, specifically here in the United States. That's a lot of our practice. But we also help people that want to connect and do business in other countries as well. Business law is one of the elements: contracts, licensing, trademarks, intellectual property, brands, and everything related to intellectual property, and also some immigration, especially related to the needs of entrepreneurs and individuals. Okay, so this is, to a large degree, an introductory class or a session for people that are going to be starting a business, basically. And this is similar material that I present to other audiences, both here in the United States and globally. So with certain minor adaptations, if you want. This would apply for anybody here in the United States or somebody that is outside the United States and wants to understand how the businesses are run here in the United States. We know the basic form of doing business here is just under your own name. It is called sole proprietor, and it is basically a non-entity. It's just yourself as an employee, if you want, or as an independent contractor. This is a good way for testing the waters and see if your business has any, and your plans have any real possibility of success. and that is before you start investing time and money on formalizing your business. This could be like, for example, for individuals, either they get paid as contractors, or it could be also for professionals. This applies more when you only have one or two clients and you really don't have a lot of complicated accounting that goes on. You get paid directly under your social security number, and usually you get what is called a 1099 form versus a W-2 form that is from a formal employer. Um, the next one, and I'm going to be focusing specifically on LLCs, is you go to the local state office. In the case of Arizona, which is where we reside, is the Arizona Corporation Commission. But also in other states, it's usually they have different names, but the most common one is the Secretary of State. And what you do is you go through a process. Most of them are online. Most of them can get you registered very quick. Here in Arizona, you can get your company registered immediately in one day, in minutes basically. As soon as you press the hit button, you are in business. Not quite, but at least as far as the Arizona state is concerned, that's you will be. LLCs is probably the simplest one. You can have one partner or no partners. Basically, I recommend you go solo as much as you can. There's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't have partners or formal partners in your company. One of them is because they become owners of something, and then it's kind of like any other relationship. I call it a marriage, and the problem with this kind of marriage is that it's not intended to be until death. Those are, you know, basically you get the point. There's going to be a lot of problems throughout the life of the company, and you want to protect yourself, but also you want to protect your potential partners. The only reason you should have a partner is because you need investments, and they are bringing something substantial to the table. For the majority of our businesses here in Arizona that are served by local firms, which are small mom and pop businesses coming up from the ground up, you probably don't need to have a partner. And if you do, then you need to have a serious consultation with an attorney and probably an accountant for that. You want to make sure you are protected. You can have several partners, as we said. One of the benefits of an LLC compared to other forms, basically, a corporation, is that in an LLC, ownership is automatic. So the moment you form the company and you list yourself as a member, you are the owner of whatever percentage of the company you got. If you got two partners, you are automatically owner of 50%. If you're the only one, you are owner 100%. Again, formally, I recommend you do not list anybody else unless it is absolutely necessary, not even your spouse. For the most part, most states in the United States, if you are married, they are your partner on anything you do. So there's no need, at least a formal need, to list them. And if you're in a relationship that is not formalized legally, such as just living together with somebody and having kids, but they are participating in your business, then that's one of those cases where you probably want to have the other person listed, or the other person wants to be listed just to protect his or her interest. An LLC, in essence, is not intended to attract investors. The other type of organizations that exist, where you have shares of stock, those lend themselves better to attract investment. But again, before you go and ask for anybody for investments, you need to have a serious conversation with your attorney. You can get into a lot of trouble if you don't do things correctly. We were talking about corporations. It could be an Inc., it could be a corp, and it will depend on the state. And they typically tend to be for more mature and big companies, not necessarily. There are big companies that are LLCs. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, Usually, you have a number of stock owners or stockholders. The big ones, the ones that are in the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, and Wall Street, they are corporations, they have shares, and they trade in the open market. So that's one of the reasons why you can start a corporation. The advantage that they have is that the stock can change hands without having to do a report on the state. Okay, in an LLC, every time you change a member, depending on how the company was structured, you probably have to do an updated filing with the state. In a corporation, you don't necessarily have to do that. It may depend on the number of shares and the majority shareholder. But for example, in big corporations that are listed in Wall Street, if I buy 500 shares or 10 shares or 20 shares, we don't need to report that to anybody. As I said, it is only recommended if you are going to be needing to raise capital. One of the big problems that you have on a corporation, especially if you are a small business owner, is that you need to invest capital. You basically have to buy shares. When a corporation is formed, it's like an empty vessel. So it doesn't have anything, it's not owned by anybody until you start buying shares on the company. Okay. And there's been some discussion with regards to C corporation and S corporation. This is just a tax preference. And what is called the C corporation is basically the default structure for corporations when you pay taxes. And in essence, taxes are paid at the entity level. LLCs in general have what is called a pass through, which means that all the profits and losses of your LLC, they go directly to the owners. They either get divided between the partners, or if it is only one owner, they just flow directly to the Form 1040 of the owner, and then they become ordinary income, or they get offset or added to other income that the person may have. The S corporation, it is also a tax selection, and it allows you to take some distributions pass through like an LLC, but also pay some um, pay directly as an employee, which is what you could do on a C corporation. That's how you would get paid or make your money as an owner on a C corporation. You're a manager, and then you get paid a paycheck, a W-2. You become an employee of the corporation. You could do the same thing with the S corporation. There are some exceptions there. So you need to consult seriously with both an attorney for legal matters and also an accountant that understands really what is going on there. But again, both of them are tax selections, and an LLC could choose to pay taxes on any of those forms, depending on the advantage. In general, unless an LLC is clearing, and again, it is net profit before taxes. It's not a cash flow. It's not EBITDA. It's not revenue. But if you are making at least $100,000 of profits, you probably can consider, depending on the tax implications, either a C or an S corporation tax condition. If you are less than that, let's say you're less than 50,000, then just going through a pass through probably is more than enough. Use an LLC and Schedule C and put it on your 1040. So, how do you do that? The company formation is relatively straightforward, depending on the state where you are. In some cases, they're still using paper. In others, they use online, but still takes some time to do that. And depending on the state where you are, corporations as well as LLCs will have to pay some maintenance. Here in Arizona, which is the state where we don't have annual fees. There's no reporting for LLCs. There are reporting and fees for corporations, but not for LLCs. So an LLC in Arizona is pretty much like a diamond. It lasts forever until you need to kill it or do something with it. As I mentioned, you do file on the here in Arizona Corporation Commission, or in the Secretary of State or other agency in your state. A lot of people ask me if it makes any sense to do any registration in other states. You typically have to register in the state where you are doing some work, especially if you have a physical presence. So for people that are here in the United States, just register in the state where you are, and that's it. People have other considerations such as taxes and things like that. So if taxes are a concern, then you need to do an evaluation if it makes sense to do your business in the state where you are. Like, for example, if you're in California, there's going to be different fees and taxes that you're going to have to face, but you got the benefit of doing business in California. So you need to balance that. For the most part, unless you are in a very high tax state, like I mentioned, it could be Massachusetts, New York, or California. Just stay in the state where you are. It doesn't make any sense to be playing around in other states. Um, some people again ask us about, for example, Delaware. And again, unless you're going to be having businesses with complicated transactions, and that's the reason why some states are incorporated where they are. Delaware, some in New York, because of the case law and the rules with regards to financial transactions. For technology, usually you have California, and then just for general business, you have Delaware, and some small businesses they may incorporate in Nevada, Florida, Wyoming, etc. But there's no free lunch. They are going to be hitting you with fees and other maintenance. So if you are not a big guy, just stay where you are. Okay, we talk about this one. There's no renewal, no reporting for LLCs. You do it, you can get it in one day. And for the most part, yeah, Arizona is pretty friendly to small businesses. And we have a lot of programs like Local First that provide this kind of support and guidance. Once you got the company form, it is going to appear here in Arizona. It's going to appear on the database, and you're going to get assigned a number. Then the next thing you need to do is get your employee identification number. Basically, your company is like a person, and your employee identification number is his social security number. And you're going to use it for a lot of things. A lot of agencies, a lot of organizations, a lot of clients, vendors. They are going to ask you for that in order to report taxes and payments that they do to you. If you want to open a bank account, which is something that you should do, open a bank account in the name of the company. And one of the things you need to do is keep things segregated. The purpose of forming a company, limited liability company, for example, has the word liability. And the corporations in general, they also provide you with the same level of statutory protection. It's not absolute. You need to manage the organization in a manner that it is at an arm's length. Basically, you work for the company and you are treating it as you're working for somebody else with all the respect and care that implies, meaning you shouldn't mix your expenses. You shouldn't use company money to pay for Obvious personal expenses sometimes, especially when you are a small company, it's not so clear whether you're doing something in behalf of the company or personally. But for example, if you have to drive around, obviously gas is going to be a business expense if it is related to business. If you need to be away or if you need to go and visit different clients, if you're doing some kind of service like cleaning or repairs or construction, some of the food that you buy may be a business expense. So you need to consult with an accountant for that so you can properly allocate and assign the expenses and the place where they belong. But it is very important that you do that so you can keep the level of liability protection that these companies provide. You can open it with your social security number, the EIN, if you have a social security number or even an ITIN. You may be able to get it again within minutes, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is automated, but I don't know why, you know, the computers are only working 7 to 5. But anyway, for people that don't have a social security number of an ITIN, such as people that are outside the United States and they want to form a company here in the United States in any state, that can be a little bit more complicated and takes paperwork and it can be pretty painful. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't or you shouldn't try. Just be aware that it's going to take us a little bit longer if you're not a US citizen, legal resident, or you don't have an IT number. Okay? We were talking about this one about taxes. We have for LLCs, for example, and some other forms for corporations. There are specific forms for that. For an LLC, you use the 1040, and then you have the Schedule C. It is mostly for U.S. citizens and legal residents, but again, you need to consult with your accountant because the idea is that if you get a pass through, you're going to be paying taxes on those profits. Um, we talk about an EIN and it goes into the Schedule C. You can have different companies, different LLCs, each one with different EIN. For example, you could have three or four different rental houses, and each of them is under an LLC, and each of them has their own checking account and their own EIN. So you got revenue, expenses, profits that get reported on each Schedule C. You would have probably four different Schedule Cs, and then you just roll them up into your personal profit or losses and offset it with other income. We talk about the limited liability. Very important. You need to comply with the rules and comply the rules of the companies. You need to use corporate protocols. Basically, treat the company as a company, not as a extension of your own business. You could have that protection removed if there is bad intent, there are crimes, bad accounting. Um, there is, there's a lot of bad stuff that can happen there. And then what you're gonna do is the protection that you thought you had on personal assets is gonna disappear, and they can go directly after you. Okay. One of the most important things that you may consider is the name of your company. Most people make the mistake of thinking two mistakes. One is they think that the name of their company is necessarily their brand, maybe, probably, but it doesn't have to be like that. And the other one, they think they get protection just by having the company registered here in Arizona, and it is basically the same thing in other states. You can register the company under a name, and then the system will do a cursory check for that name. It's quick and dirty. It doesn't really cost you anything. Most of the time is very limited to the exact name you provided or minor variations, but that's not your brand. You could use terms that are not applicable for federal trademark protection, but you could get them for the name of your company. So just be careful on that. You get what you pay for. Um, a trade name, which is the other thing, the other mistake I was talking about, is it is something that is offered in the majority of the states. It's also called in some cases as DBA, doing business as, which, as the name says, is just a brand. This is just another name that you are using to identify yourself. Changes by state, but again, here in Arizona, it is fast and cheap to apply. You can get it in about a week or two, and doesn't do the same level, doesn't have any serious analysis of the trademark. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not gonna look for deep similarities with other trade names that are already registered. um, it is just going to look for, it's only going to do a cursory check, a quick cursory check. If it is already there, it usually costs like $10 and it is good for 5 years. We don't recommend you rely on that unless your business has nothing to do or will never have any exposure to other states. If you are going to do a taco shop, for example, and you're only going to be doing business in Arizona, um, you have to consider if it's worth protecting it. But keep in mind that even if you are only operating local, there may be somebody else that is operating nationally, and they may have a trademark, and they may be able to come and stop you from using your name. Just keep that in mind. If you make the decision that, yeah, I need to look at the next level of protection, then that's a trademark. It comes from the United States Trademark and Patent Office, and it has a higher level of scrutiny. And before they do an acceptance, they look at similarity, a pretty deep dive in similarity. You could also look at translation. So if you want to use a name in a different language, they may look at it and say, no, you cannot do that because there's already somebody in X language using that. They are going to limit you to not use generic terms. Generic terms don't have protection because they are just descriptors of your product or your service. There's going to be a few things with illegality. Um, there's it is longer. It takes about 6 to 8 months. Use offers only protection here in the United States, doesn't do anything for you outside the United States, but gives you a base to go on claim protection in other countries. But again, it's not absolute. You need to be very smart and consult with an attorney if you're going to be having anything in other countries. You could use it for stopping other people um, if you um, if you decide that the other person is using your brand in an inappropriate way. It only has national scope, and if you need global scope, it's going to be more expensive, and you need to go basically country by country or jurisdiction by jurisdiction to get that protection. Okay. So you may have seen the terms TM or R. R is when you get a trademark approved by the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which is basically this one. When you go to the USPTO file and it gets approved, then you can use the R in here. TM is what is called a common law trademark. Basically, you're just using it because you're using it, and you are telling the world that, hey, this is my mark. Doesn't give you too much of a protection. And the only thing that it does is identify that you're using that name for for you. Other than that, we prefer VR. But once you start using your trademark and you are in the process of applying for the USPTO, we always recommend people, especially if they want to, show people that they know what they're doing, to start using the TM on their name. So we talked before about brand versus the name of the company. You do. We said that people sometimes confuse the name of the company with a brand. A brand is a concept in marketing, and it is for identifying a company, a product, or an individual, or a service, like a singer, a band, Lady Gaga, for example, Nike. Um, so you want to make sure that, number one, you're not infringing somebody. So research the name, research the logo, do an internet search, do it locally. There's a database from the United States Patent and Trademark Office where you can check for the names. But again, you need to know how to use it in order to, utilize that tool to the best of its capability. And you gotta understand that the brand may not be protected until you have filed and got the registration. Now, that doesn't mean that you cannot do anything ever with your brand. If you've been using it consistently for a long time and somebody's doing things in bad faith, then you could still try to claim some rights over that. That's called common law rights, but they are more limited than if you have a registration. Think of it as living in a place versus owning the place and having a title to that place. It is registered in the with the county. So you can use that one and get more. If you don't have a title, nobody has a title, then it becomes a fight to demonstrate who was there first and what kind of rights you have. If you have a title, then the title says, hey, you're the rightful owner, or whoever is there is the rightful owner, and he's the only one that can claim rights against somebody else. So, what can you trademark? It depends on the country. Uh, different countries have different categories of things. Here in the United States, just having their names, that's basically text. It could be name of products, name of services. It could be logos. It could be slogans. It could be colors, like the UPS brown when applied to trucks and uniforms for delivery of products. You could have it's also called trade dress. You could do the McDonald's color scheme. Um, Logos tend to be a little bit, depending on what you're doing, a little bit easier, depending on how different they are from others. And that's because depending on what you're doing, there may be a lot of generic logos that, or generic images to represent the product or the service. So, for example, if you're in real estate, very likely you could register a logo that includes a house, but you got to make sure that that house doesn't look like other houses that have been registered already. You could also register jingles. It's not the music itself. Music is copyright. Jingle is trademark, short jingles, even GIFs, where something is moving very quick. That could be also protected as a trademark. We don't want to confuse with the copyright, which is a different animal. In other countries, you can register smells and taste, but I don't think that's the case here in the United States, and I've never seen anything like that come across our desk. Um, One thing to recommend, we were talking about other states for registering companies. Privacy tends to be one of the big issues, second by taxes. In Wyoming, for example, you can file an LLC without having to disclose who are the owners. When you file here in Arizona, on most of the states, you have to tell people what it is that you are, who's behind it. So you got to be careful on that. Usually we recommend you use a combination of it could be holdings, it could be trusts, it could be attorneys, agents, to increase your level of privacy. None of these is a wall that is going to protect you. This is going to be more like a series of nets um, that are going to try to stop some or most of the things coming against you. Okay, we are going to talk briefly about contracts, depending on the type of engagements that you have. And again, for people with local first, we are most likely talking about small, medium sized companies. But you still need to be very careful. Sometimes having a client sign a contract can be a little bit of a pain, and it is for me as well. People don't like to go through a lot of paperwork, but that's the reality. A contract is just a binding agreement, and how you make it legal, that depends on how it is put together. And the most important thing for a contract is the memorialization. Most people tell you that you need to have it in writing. In reality, you have to have it memorialized, which means that somehow there's evidence. And the problem with an oral contract, basically just talking, is what kind of evidence you have about the terms of the agreement. Most likely it's going to be one guy versus another guy. Maybe you have a witness, but then the witness may not be very reliable, or maybe you may not be considered truthful. So if you got any evidence, either writing, a formal contract, or some other ways, such as, for example, text, WhatsApp, voice recording, things of that nature, that can be used to prove the existence and the terms of the contract. It could be any kind of thing, even personal things like getting married, a divorce, or a lot of other things. They are contracts. So you always need to be putting things under the lens of what kind of a contract we got in here. And it is important that you have all the elements. You need to have an offer from somebody, has to be an acceptance, and there's got to be an exchange of value for that. Otherwise, it is a gift. If there's no exchange of something, then you're just giving a gift to somebody. And also, you need to be aware of what are the terms of that contract. Otherwise, how are you going to execute that? And again, I'm just going to wrap up with some of the key things. One of the things I tell people is to limit the amounts that you run on a contract, especially if you're not getting paid immediately. And I have the 3,000 and the 10,000 limits. And that is basically 3,000, below 3,000, you can litigate in a small claims court, and under 10,000 you can do in a city court, and those ones tend to be faster, less expensive, even if you use an attorney, and you could recover some of your expenses for the attorney if you win. We talk about not having partners, even family, and again, it's for protection of everybody, because if you get sued, they are going to try to drag everybody that appears in your registration of the company. uh, Not having contracts in place, and then mechanics lien is basically for people, and it is to a large degree a contract as well. This is an agreement that I am spending a lot of time and money doing something that has a physical um, a physical entity, basically a house or a vehicle. That's why it is called a mechanics lien, and you can file a lien over the house to prevent that somebody just disappears, sells the house, pockets the profits, and never pays you. mixing personal finances with business, not doing your research, especially when it comes to the name of your company, and not seeking legal advice early enough to make sure that you don't get into trouble. So that's kind of it. You can visit us at Marcos Law. If you guys have any questions, we'll be happy to go through them.
Marcos, thank you so much. We really do appreciate this presentation. And for those who would like to ask a question, please feel free to get off mute and ask those questions. We do have some questions in the chat for you, Marcos.
Okay,
So I'll
so
go in that order as well. One of it is, what is the benefit for an LLC to report taxes as a corp, as a C corp?
it depends on how much money you're making. For example, with some of the tax cuts from the Trump administration, if the company is making a lot of money, may not be a bad idea to pay taxes at the corporate level if it is high enough. And again, that's where I said probably unless the company is clearing over $100,000 or more, you are, you know, you shouldn't worry about how to do the pass through. That is one, and it's more of a tax strategy rather than anything. And I do offer more complete consultation if that person is lucky enough to be making more than $100,000. Then there's a series of strategies that he or she needs to have in order to minimize the risk and potentially also their taxes.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Marcos. The next question is from Gabriela. Says, can you still use receipts based used for business purchases if you haven't opened a separate checking account yet?
You could for taxes, yes, but you need to keep a detailed separation of the. Let's say you're paying with you're paying with your own pocket money. Just make sure you keep it completely separate and for tax purposes, deduction purposes. If you don't have a company, then one of the things you could do at least is maybe have a separate account. It could be a credit card, it could be and even if you have the company, just get a credit card or a debit card or a checking account, separate from your own personal finances. And again, it depends on where you are. If it is still in the kicking the tires stage, probably don't worry too much, especially if the amounts are small. Once it starts becoming a real business, then you need to professionalize it. And it is,
Okay, yeah.
it's not only for the taxes, but also you're going to have people come to you and say, hey, I need your insurance, I need your EIN, I need you to fill out these forms. So they are almost forcing you to go through the whole professionalization.
Okay, yeah, because I have an LLC, but I just started in July, so that's why. But I have already before this, someone was like, "You need to get a separate bank account or a credit card," and I was like, "Oh, okay," because I was saving all the receipts, but I wasn't. I mean, since I was just a baby starting, I didn't think I needed to get the separation, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to do that. Thank you.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And we have another question from Fermin. It says, can you touch base on trademarking logos for graphic designer as a service for customer requests? And I think you touched that briefly on one of the slides that you had.
Yeah, I think what he's talking about is about the rights that you get. So there's a couple of things, and for the most part, if your business is providing a services of logo design, you need to make it clear. And again, that is either a regular policy, uh, which becomes part of your terms and conditions of the service, or a separate contract, where you outline to the client what kind of exclusive rights they have for the product. For example, You can go and buy photos, stock photos from somebody, Getty Photos, or there's a lot of other companies that will sell you photos, and you can pay from $20 to $1,000 for the photo. If you pay $20 or $50, for example, it only allows you to it allows you to use it for whatever you want, but it's not exclusive. They may be selling the same photo to somebody else. If you are paying much more, then you tell them, hey, yeah, that's going to be your photo, or it could be a time window on that. So you need to be very careful on that. It will depend on how much they are paying you. If they are paying you $500 for a design of the logo, yeah, probably you need to give them some level of exclusivity and rights. If it is $50, it's like, no, I'm probably going to be reselling or modifying this logo and selling it to other people. So you got to be very clear with your clients on that. And, the other thing you could do, and depending on the level of engagement that you want to have, you could do some pre-work to make sure that whatever logo you create for them, and this is a problem that I run into with a lot of companies where they pay thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars to marketing agencies, and then I just tell them, this name, yeah, it's not going to make it. There's already so many with similar names registered, so you're probably going to be rejected. And somebody should have stop and do a legal check on that. I don't offer the services of the creativity portion, but I do offer the services of the brainstorming and reviewing to make sure that you're not going to get stuck with something that you cannot use.
Mhm. Excellent. Great suggestions. Thank you, Marcos. And then we have another one by Tatiana. As an LLC, do you have to pay taxes quarterly or pay annually?
It's only annually. Depends on how many taxes you're going to pay. And, again, this is where you go and talk to a tax preparer, you educate yourself, or an accountant. You could pay taxes quarterly depending on what it is. Let's say you're gonna end up paying $10,000 in federal taxes every year. You may as well just send a check every so often for $1,000, $2,000. The IRS will be happy to take the money, and they do have a system for that. So you can you can do that definitely. If you don't pay some taxes during the year, and you end up owing a substantial amount of money, they may charge you a penalty and maybe interest. So it's not a bad idea to pay throughout the year.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That wraps up, I think, the questions that we had. And so from the chat, but if there's anybody else online that would like to ask a question directly to Marcos while we have him here, please feel free to go off mute and ask that question.
I have a quick question about the privacy with your LLC registration with your address. I actually already registered my LLC, and because it's like a remote business, I had to use my personal address. Is there any way to change that to a PO box or something?
Yeah, there is a form that you can, if you form your own LLC here in Arizona, and I'm just going to make some speculations. You probably went and created an account with Arizona Corporation Commission, which is what, I have an account. I go and just create companies and make changes for other people. What you do is you log in, look at the services that they offer. There's a table. It's not necessarily intuitive. And then find to make changes. You can change the address, and then you can just add whatever new address you got in there.
Okay, thank you. That's easy.
Yeah.
To piggyback on that question, so I'm in the same boat. If we were to do that, get the PO box, fill out the form and all that, do you happen to know? Because I think what I was understanding when be listed on Google, it can't be a PO box.
So
And
this is the you know this is the thing. It cannot be a PO box for the agent of service. And if you remember, the strategy for to preserve in um, some level of privacy was to use trust, to use holding companies, to use attorneys, to use a bunch of different things. So if you're going to be listing yourself as an agent, you have to put a street address for that. In our case, for example, we have a PO box and then we have our office.
a brick and
So
mortar, yeah.
so we just put them in there, and and for the most part, the agent will only be receiving legal documentation, which unless you get into trouble with somebody else that they want to sue you, it's probably not going to happen. So you'll never get anything. So you could pay. There's companies that will charge you. We offer that service as well, just to be your agent for service. And with all the companies that we form, especially if they are international, we offer that, and also their address, their business address.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mark.
Um, so there's a couple of questions here. Are there templates for contracts? You can, depends on what it is. You do have, uh, let's see, you have to pay taxes. So you can Google them. And most of the ones you're going to find are fairly simple. Doesn't mean they are bad. But they may not be covering everything you need depending on your business. The big recommendation I would say is if somebody starts owing you more than $3,000 and they keep you the runaround, cut your losses. And if it gets, don't let it get past $10,000 because then you'll have to sue them on a different court. Gets more expensive. And even if you win, there's not assurance that you'll ever collect from these people. One thing is suing, another thing is winning, another thing is getting your money. There's a question here from Christina on listing the spouse. I would probably flip a coin whether I should be removing him or not. Just be aware that if something happens, they are going to drag you uh, to you know they're going to drag him as well, even if he or she never had anything to do with the business. If he does have something to do with the business, if he's helping, then yeah, probably leave him in there. Just because somebody is not registered as a member, that doesn't mean that you cannot have him as an account um, manager, for example, for your banking account. Just like any other corporations, for example, they hire somebody and he's the CFO, he's the general manager. You can do the same thing with your company. They don't have to be partners or members, but you could say, hey, this guy is my chief operating officer, and he or she can have the authority uh, to do whatever is necessary for the company. There's a question here: when you may need something more in voice. I don't quite understand the question, but when you send an
No,
invoice,
it's me. I'm
oh,
saying something more nuanced, something
oh,
more nuanced. Like,
when
there's
for
just
contracts, for
all kinds
example.
of different businesses and it changed it. The spell check changed it.
Okay,
So, but
so
I
for
just think that
example,
yeah.
yeah, that's a lot. I mean, within a presentation, it's a bit more complicated. You could do that via consultation. The guys from Local First, they offer specific programs for food businesses. So if anybody does like catering, cooking, pastries, restaurants, then you can go through a specific program with them that will teach you everything you need to do, all the basics you need to do on that, licenses and all kinds of things. For other businesses, it's you know, we do have some areas of expertise on especially services like contracting and things like that. But it will depend on your specific needs.
And we do have somebody raising their hand, Cristian Carrillo.
Yeah, Marcos, ¿qué tal? Hey, I have a quick question. What's the difference, or is there any benefit to doing service contracts versus regular or service agreements versus contracts?
No, they are basically the same thing. An agreement is a contract. It will depend on what it is in there. A service agreement or a contract for services, it is basically, let's say you're going to come and paint a house, or you're going to frame a house, or you're going to build a pool, or you're going to do clean an apartment or a building. That's basically what it is. A lot of the terms that you will have in there are along the lines of limitation of liability for the company for whatever you do. So basically, they want you to be responsible. And then, if you remember, I told you that they may ask you for insurance, and they're going to be when you get your insurance for the company, they're going to ask you for EIN and a bunch of other things. So that's the tail of all the paperwork that we were talking about. And the other thing they want to make sure is that you're a contractor, you're a separate entity, you're not employee from them, and you are not, because you're just coming on your own to do work for them. One thing people need to be careful is when to categorizing somebody as a contractor versus an employee, but that's a different discussion.
That certainly is a different discussion there. Thank you so much, Marcos. I think for the sake of time and for wrapping it up, thank you so much for doing this presentation. And please, if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to Marcos as well. We will be also sending this recording out once it's listed on our local learning lab. So please take a look at your email inbox, because we'll be sending this out in a few days. But thank you so much for everything and for all your questions. And Marcos, again, a phenomenal presentation. Thank you.
So you can find me at marcoslaw.com. It was in the presentation. Or you can also look at abogadomarcos.com in Spanish, English, and then you can email us or call us. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
great
wonderful day.